Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I am here today with Kristi Dosh. Kristi is a publicist who founded Guide My Brand to work with entrepreneurs and nonfiction authors to establish themselves as experts in their niches and become more visible for their expertise through opportunities such as guest blogs, podcast interviews like I'm doing today, public speaking engagements, which if you guys have been listening to the podcast lately, I'm venturing out into that. And my last episode, 109, I talk all about how public speaking was a fear worse than death. So I'm super excited to be talking to the expert today, and I'm getting some tips on how to speak to an audience and how to book a gig. And she's been in Forbes. I mean, you guys, she's amazing. She's been an entrepreneur and Pop Sugar, and she basically created her own brand, Guide My Brand. Kristi is her own best case study. She began her career as a corporate attorney and used a combination of blogging and social media, public speaking, and media appearances to become a nationally recognized expert on the business of sports. She felt the corporate world, she left the corporate world to work for such outlets as Forbes and ESPN, and today she works with busy entrepreneurs and nonfiction authors who want to become experts themselves and step into the spotlight so they can grow. You guys can visit her website at www.guidemybrand.com. And I'm super excited to welcome Kristi to the show. I've been listening to her from afar on some of my friends' podcasts like Lori Harder and Heather Parody, and checking out her brand because I would love to get involved with everything she does. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome the one and the only Kristi Dosh to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited. As your audience will soon learn, I love podcast interviews. It's the number one thing I push my clients to do. So I'm always excited when I get to, walk the talk and show my clients like, look, I do podcasts too.
Why do you like podcasts as your number one go-to?
A number of different reasons. Of all the types of publicity you could get, guest blogs, speaking, TV, podcast interviews seem to have the fastest and most direct results. You tend to see calls booked on your calendar. If you've got some low priced offers, you might see direct sales. And you usually see your email list grow from a podcast interview. That doesn't necessarily happen with other types of publicity. So I like that fast direct impact that make clients feel like, yes, this is doing something for me, because it's hard to keep putting yourself out there if you're not seeing results. So I like when they get that little bit of instant gratification. And I think that podcasts are so powerful because even when it's just an audio podcast, people hear the passion in your voice for what you do. And I think that makes all the difference in the world.
I mean, it is so true. And sometimes you're not sure, like, am I affecting, anybody? Are people listening? I mean, I think you get feedback, of course, with your reviews and things, but once in a while you do an episode and you wonder, did that hit home? And the other night I was actually in bed. It was kind of late. It was like, I heard a ding on my phone. I forgot to turn off my notifications. And it was somebody that had just listened to my Fear of Public Speaking podcast. And she was just like, I'm so freaking proud of you. And it felt, I don't know how to explain that feeling of knowing you connected with your audience. And I was so vulnerable in that episode. I mean, I think I ended up by saying, well, I did it. This freaking scared the crap out of me. And so I was kind of like feeling vulnerable because I'm not used to showing up on an interview by myself.
Yeah.
I'm used to having a great guest like you, Kristi.
Well, I was at a writing conference recently and I heard somebody talk about, and I don't know if they borrowed the quote from somebody else, but they said that, and I've heard quotes about how like courage isn't the absence of fear and that sort of thing. But the way this person put it was courage is feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And I just thought that was awesome. Like it's people who you see out there doing things and you think, oh, like, I wish I was like that. I wish I was comfortable doing that. Just remember that they may not be either. The only difference between you and them is they were willing to just like soak in and feel the fear and make themselves do it anyway. That's how it is for a lot of my clients when they start getting more visible.
Wow. So when you got contacted by ESPN, how did that all go down? Did you have a little bit of fear at the beginning?
Yeah, that was a little unexpected. I was a full-time practicing attorney, had wanted to be an attorney my entire life. Like very few attorneys, I actually enjoyed being an attorney. I wasn't like actively looking to get out. I had just been blogging about legal issues in sports on the side for fun. I love to write and it was a creative outlet for me. And I really did it for fun. I never expected it to change my career. But over the course of several years, I first got invited to contribute to Forbes based on some blogs they saw that I had been writing already. Then I got a weekly television spot on a regional sports network. And I wrote for Forbes and did the weekly TV spot for 2 years before ESPN came to me. And that wasn't like a job that I applied for or anything. Someone I knew mentioned my name to them. And I had been quoted and linked to a lot on their site because writers on their site were linking to pieces I was writing on my site or on Forbes because I had a unique angle on sports business, particularly the business of college sports. And that attracted their attention and they asked me to come meet with them. And I can remember I had to pay my own way. So I didn't think it was a job interview because I had to pay to fly to Connecticut to meet ESPN. And I thought we were just like networking, getting to know each other better. Like they were just going to show me around ESPN. Like, you know, it was just a friendly sort of thing. And I meet with all these people all day and I'm thinking they're just teaching me what all the different departments do and whatever. And I get to the end of the day and I meet with the head of ESPN.com at the time, Rob King. And at the end of our meeting, he said, I'm going to be reaching out to your agent with an offer. And I was like, an offer for what? And I didn't really have an agent at the time. Now, he thought that the person who sort of introduced me to them was my agent because he was an agent, but he actually was not mine. I signed the paperwork for him to be my agent in the car after that because he was like, my company's going to kill me if you get this ESPN offer and I wasn't your agent when you got it. But I can remember asking Rob King, like, an offer for what? And he was like, a job offer. And I was like, you're gonna make me a job offer? Like, I'm an attorney. So it was completely unexpected. And there was fear around it in the sense that I wanted to be an attorney my whole life. At that point, I had been practicing 4.5 years or so. I had clients of my own. I was on track to become a partner in a law firm. Everything was sort of going according to plan. And I'm very much a like, plan it and to do the steps and get where you're supposed to be going. And so the fear for me was leaving being an attorney for the total unknown. I had no idea what it meant to be a full-time journalist. They were offering me a 2-year contract and I thought, well, what do I do at the end of the 2 years if they don't renew me? So it was actually a really scary leap, especially since it wasn't something I was out there proactively looking for.
I would say.
But at the end of the day, I never really seriously considered saying no. I grew up watching ESPN. I'm a huge sports fan. Like, who says no to that? But it definitely was scary, but one of the best things I ever did. It was awesome.
I bet you're kind of like, I could be a lawyer later.
Well, and that's what I told myself was, okay, they don't pick me up at the end of the 2 years. I can always go back to practicing law. I can't pick back up where I left off. I will have had to let my clients go and that sort of thing. But I can go back. And in fact, over the years, I have been made offers by many, many law firms now because what I didn't anticipate that ended up happening, I did not practice sports law when I was a lawyer. I did corporate law, I did real estate finance, nothing to do with sports. But when I left ESPN, I did have people approach me who wanted me to come do sports law and come work in a firm as a sports law attorney, which had been my dream my whole life. That's what I always wanted to do. It's just not many people get into it right out of law school. But after being out of practicing for a few years, I realized I could never go back. I keep up my law license. It's a good safety net, but I can't imagine ever going back at this point. My lifestyle and the way I structure my days and how much I travel, I could never go back to working in a law office 12 hours a day, nor do I want to.
Yeah. So, you know, it's just so cool how the opportunity met you. And I mean, you're on ESPN and you wrote a blog. How did you get started into this blogging with Forbes? You know, I know a lot of us want to get featured in publications, and you got this great opportunity out of being featured in Forbes. I know, like, I went to the Greg Gutfeld show recently. He's on Fox, and he was first in fitness, you guys. I don't know if you've ever seen his show, but he was like a fitness editor for like Men's Health. And here he is, this political funny guy commentator on Fox now. And I asked a question in the audience. I told you I'm afraid of public speaking. So it's my practice is just asking a question in front of a large audience. And so I asked him, well, how in the world did you make the transition from Men's Health editor to this political commentator? And he said he was writing a blog for the Huffington Post, and that's how they contacted him. So that's why I really want to dive into how did you get into Forbes and how does one get featured into a major brand like that?
Yeah, so I can tell you my path to getting into Forbes was a little unusual. I can tell you how it works for my clients, which is a little more the normal track. For me, I was writing my own blog, just started on a free WordPress blog. No one ever read it. And I think that's the hard thing for people when they start blogging. And it's like you were talking about earlier with your podcast. If you feel like you're just pushing content like into the void and you're not ever hearing from people and you have no idea is anybody listening or reading, you're not getting any comments or any feedback, it is really hard to keep going because like there's no motivation and you feel like you're wasting your time. And I always tell people, you never know how close you are. And I don't know if some of you have seen it. There's a graphic that goes around on social media sometimes, and it's got like a split screen, and it shows two guys who are like digging in a cave towards what us as the viewer can see is this pile of diamonds at the end. One guy has gone like, almost, I mean, he's got this much to go. He just doesn't know that. And he's turned around and he's walking off, whereas the other guy's still going. You never know like how close you are to hitting those diamonds. And I think, I always say that I think the biggest difference between people who make it in business and really in general just make it to any goal that they have and the people who don't is just the people who made it never stopped. That's it. Like there really is no magic formula except they never stopped. Maybe they had to adjust their plan, do things differently, but they never stopped. They kept doing it until it happened. And with blogging in particular, I've mentored a lot of people over the years who knew how I got my start and they wanted to blog, particularly young sports writers who wanted to blog and get into sports, and hardly any of them stuck with it and ever actually made it anywhere. I was writing into the void and I didn't care because I actually already had a book deal. I had written a legal journal article in law school and I'd gotten a book deal off of that. And so I approached the blogging, not that I cared whether anyone was reading it, but that it was helping me flesh out ideas for the book. So when I look back, it's not like I have a better mindset around it and kept going even though people weren't reading it. It was really just, it was like public research for my book basically. But that gave me like a body of work essentially. And I was reading the sports money column in Forbes, and the editor there at the time, Michael Ozanian, had written something about Major League Baseball's collective bargaining agreement, and that happened to be what my book was about. So I knew that subject really well, and I emailed him just to say that I enjoyed his piece and that, you know, I thought there was one little thing that like maybe he got wrong, which looking back was pretty ballsy. I was like 25 at the time. And I'm emailing the head of the sports section and Forbes telling me got something wrong. But in my email signature, I had my blog, and I had mentioned in the email that the reason I knew this fact was because I was writing a book about it. And within a couple of days, he emailed me back and he said, we need more people like you writing in our section. Do you want to come write for us? So I was never looking for a contributor role there. That was almost 10 years ago. That was 2000. Well, it was 10 years ago now, I guess. It was April of 2009. And at that point, I don't think people really understood that Forbes had contributors, and that there was like a contributor model. At least I knew nothing about it. And so when he invited me to become a contributor, I didn't even know that was a thing. So that's why I say, I think my path is a little bit different in that I sort of happened into that. But the way that it works now, just in case anybody's curious about writing for Forbes, to be a contributor for Forbes, they do not take one-offs. Other publications will let you write for them just one piece. Forbes doesn't take one-offs anymore. That could change, but right now they don't take one-offs. You have to commit to writing 5 times a month at a minimum. They do actually pay. There's a base amount for writing those 5. There's actually a higher base amount if you write 7 or more. And then there are these traffic bonuses essentially that can allow you to make more money. I've never done it for the money. When I started, they didn't pay at all. That's a new thing. But they have like an editorial board that has to review you. You send in a description of your beat. They call it your swim lane, but it's essentially what you want to cover. You send 10 headline suggestions, and you send links to 3 things you've written in other places. They cannot be your blog, 3 things you've written in other places. And so one thing we run into with clients is they come to us and they want to write for Forbes, but they've never written anywhere except maybe their own site. So we have to backtrack and go place guest blogs in other places first. That might be places that aren't as big or as well known. That's not as important. They just want to see that you've written for other sites. They want to get a feel for your writing style, your voice. Are you a good writer? Do you understand grammar? Like, they want to see those writing samples, and they want them to be on other websites, not your own. That's not necessarily true for every outlet, but that's the way, that Forbes does it. So then you send that in to the editor for the section that you want to be in, which takes a little research to figure out who that person is. And it goes to if they approve you, then it goes above them to an editorial board. And I know because my husband just got on at Forbes recently, and I found out later my editor was on the editorial board that approved him, but my husband and I have different last names. So he had no idea it was my husband. So there was no preferential treatment because he had no idea it was my husband. But that's how I found out that they've moved to this editorial board. Even as a contributor, I didn't know that because I've been there 10 years. So it has become a much more difficult place to get into. What is easier, it's not easy, but easier, is to approach someone who already writes for Forbes and pitch yourself as what we call a source. So pitch yourself as an expert source that they can quote, or sometimes they'll write a whole feature on you. We just had a client that had a book come out in December, and we were able to get in, but from one writer, we got just a quote, one quote, had his name, had a link to his book, went to another writer and ended up getting a full feature that is nothing but his advice from the book, has a link to the book. So we pitch clients for both quotes and then what we call features. So those are easier to get in Forbes than getting yourself in as a contributor. And quite honestly, they take a lot less of your time than having to contribute 5 times a month.
Right. Yeah. And it sounds like you got a lot of mileage, a lot of traction.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about blogs and sites like that is I get the vast majority of my speaking, and I've been speaking for a decade, so paid speaking, from Forbes, from people who, like event organizers, who know what subjects they want covered at their event. And if they don't know somebody off the top of their head, they hit Google like the rest of us, and they're trying to find people, and they'll find articles I wrote on that topic, and then they'll reach out to me to speak. So I get the vast majority of my paid speaking from writing for Forbes and then from LinkedIn. But I don't really get traffic to my website because the only link I get to my website is in my bio. And that is true on most sites. You generally cannot link to your own stuff if you are the writer of the piece. And that's not just huge outlets like Forbes. I've seen that a lot at even what I would consider to be like mid-level and lower tiered publications as well. And people, quite honestly, just don't click through links in bios. So you are not going to see the traffic on your website likely go up when you write a guest blog, but it's a huge credibility builder, huge SEO for you, so that if people are searching for the topic, or even if they're just searching for your name,
they can
come up in search results. So it's worth doing. I just want people to understand it's not where the traffic's at. But if someone else writes about you and they quote you or they feature you and they've got that link to your website or the link to your book, when they say, you know, Kristi Dosh, founder of Guide My Brand and author of Saturday Millionaires, and I get a link, that gets you traffic.
It's the introduction, right?
Yeah. So if you're looking to drive traffic, then you want someone else to write about you. You don't want to be the writer. But if you want speaking and you want, there's credibility opportunities in both, but I found being the writer has given me credibility. It gets me speaking. It got me a book deal. So there are advantages to both. And that's why, generally speaking, we are pitching clients for both. We want them to do some writing, but we also want them to be written about.
So speaking, let's talk a little bit more about that and just being seen as the expert. How do you position yourself then? Is it just through writing that you're positioning yourself to be the expert so people want to hear you speak?
Yeah.
What is your philosophy on that?
It evolves over time. So now, 10 years after I pitched myself to speak for the first time, I rarely pitch myself to speak because my calendar is usually full with people who came to me because they either found something I wrote on Forbes, or now I've written for Fast Company, for Entrepreneur, I write for Pop Sugar now. So either they found something I've written, or they found me on LinkedIn. I get found on LinkedIn a lot, or it was a referral from somebody else who's heard me speak or hosted me to speak. So I don't pitch myself because there's not enough time on my calendar really for me to add any other events, which is a great problem to have. But note that it took me 10 years to get there. That's not something that happened in the beginning. My very first speaking gig I ever had that I would consider like a true speaking gig was at a university. So I lived in Atlanta at the time. I was practicing law. I was not writing for Forbes yet, but I was writing on my own blog, and I did have my book deal already from the journal article I had in law school. I don't think that's a prerequisite. I don't think you have to have written a book or had a book deal. I think it helps, but I don't think you have to. I know plenty of people who speak who haven't written a book. It's just an added bonus, and it does make it a little easier once you have a book. But I just pitched myself to a professor at Georgia State University. She taught a class in sport finance, which aligned with what I was writing my book about. And I just found her, like I looked through the course catalog, I found her email, I emailed her and I said, I'd love to come guest lecture one day. Here's what I can talk about. And she said yes. And I found, generally speaking, professors love to have you because they get to take a day off from teaching. I've been a professor, so I'm not just like giving professors a hard time. I have taught, and it's awesome when you've got a great guest speaker who comes in and speaks for the day. So that's how I started out, was university.
You're my guest speaker today.
Right. So I started out in the Atlanta area of all the universities I could find that had sports management programs, because that was my specialty. I started out speaking in classrooms. And then from there, I did that for probably 6 months before I got the position writing at Forbes. And once I started writing at Forbes, speaking invitations started coming into me. Now, I at that time was still kind of proactively pitching myself for some things too, but the biggest trick to anything when it comes to publicity is just being willing to send the email. Like every great thing I've ever gotten came from an email. The first book deal I got that was based on my legal journal article, it's not like the guy read the legal journal and was like, ooh, we want to make this into a book. I found out about this editor from like a friend of a friend, and I emailed him one day and sent him my legal journal article. And he was like, do you want to make it into a book? So,
oh my gosh, I love it. That's how I got started writing.
Yeah, the position at Forbes was an email. The TV spot I got, I found the producer's email on the website, emailed, said, if you ever need a legal expert to come on and talk about legal issues in sports, I'd love to. I'd never done TV before, had no idea what I was doing. But they let me come on once and that went well. And so then they had me on again and that turned into a weekly segment. And then I always joke and I say, I pitched myself for radio interviews and podcasts and speaking and all these different things. And one of the things I pitched myself for was a radio show in Atlanta that I wanted to go on. I was getting radio requests anyway from my writing, but there was one particular show in Atlanta I wanted to be on because I listened to it. And so I pitched myself for the show, and the person I pitched is now my husband.
I love that. That's a great story.
Never had me on the show, but instead asked me out on a date, and we have been together for almost 9 years now. So I always say the best pitch I ever sent of all the stuff I've gotten, the book deals, the TV appearances, the paid speaking, the best pitch I ever sent got me a husband.
Oh my gosh, that works. That works. I always tease my husband because back in the day, I worked in a gym and I was selling memberships, and I was the cash out queen, which means I like cash people out for years. They'd be like members, and I could not cash him out. So I did it for real. I tease him. I'm like, I married you in cash.
I love it.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm just really kidding, but yeah, he's like, yeah, you did, didn't you?
I love it.
So, oh my gosh. Wow. So with publicity, it sounds like, I think first of all, you have to be willing to take the leap and just go for it. You have to send that email and just, be like, all of us are afraid, like you said, but you have to be willing to take a stab at something. You may not be great at it at first, but you're going to, with practice, I would imagine you're going to get better and better because you're really accomplished now.
Look, I go back and I watch my first television appearance. I still have it. And I go back and I watch it, and cringeworthy does not even begin to describe it. It is really bad. I can't believe they had me back again. But now, that was almost 10 years ago. I've been through media training working at ESPN. I have been on probably 200 or more television shows at this point. I couldn't have gotten better without just getting out there and doing it. I had a client this week who had a podcast interview, and she was afraid to share it with her audience because she felt like she didn't do that great of a job. She didn't think she sounded that smart on the podcast. So she didn't even want to share it for anyone to listen to it. And we had to talk about how, first of all, she's only going to get better doing more reps. Second of all, I listened, she wasn't bad at all. It's all, she's being much harder on herself than other people will be. And I think most of us are like that. But you're never going to get better until you get out there and start doing it. I'm better at TV now. I'm better at being interviewed. I'm a better writer. I'm a better speaker. But none of those things would have happened if I hadn't been doing them for the last 10 years.
Yeah. And I think you have to be willing to do some things for free, because when I started, I was writing a letter to the owner of Miss Fitness because somebody had suggested I should write articles about older competitors competing against younger ones. And I thought, well, I'm not a writer, but I thought, well, I'll take a stab at it. So I was writing her a letter, and that literally became my first article. And then I went on to write a whole, like all these cover stories and my own column called Fit Over 40. So I wrote for them for 15 years. And then I got to write with a New York Times bestselling author, Anne Louise Gittleman. I got to write a book with her, I collaborate on one.
Yeah.
And then I wrote my own too. So it's just, I think you have to be willing to do things at first that maybe you're not getting paid for.
And everybody starts somewhere. Like whatever person you see out there and you're like, oh, I want to be that person. A conversation I have a lot with my clients is they want to be the next Tony Robbins or the next Mel Robbins or the next Gary Vee or the next Oprah or whoever it is. And so I actually had someone on my team go and research. I chose like a half a dozen big kind of influencers like that. And I had somebody on my team go research and figure out, where did they start? What were they doing before? Like what was kind of their big break? How often are they producing content now? We looked up all this stuff about them, and I'm getting ready to do probably a big blog post on it. But it was super interesting because I'll have clients who Mel Robbins goes live every single morning. So I'll have clients who talk about,
I love her, by the way.
I'm like, Mel Robbins goes live every single morning, I guess weekday mornings. You know, she does this. I start naming off like all the content she's creating. I'm like, are you putting that much out into the world? Okay, get started. And she talks, I think it was it was Marie Forleo. She was another one we looked up. And we actually found an interview with her where she talked about that the turning point for her, she was putting out content, but like nothing was quite catching on. And the turning point for her was when she chose a set day and time, or I think it was multiple days.
Oh, right. She was
like, yeah, like set days and times to do her videos. And then her viewership started growing because people knew when to expect them. Now, like I have tried that several times and quite honestly, I just can't stick to it. It just does not fit my lifestyle. So now I've got to adjust and find something else to do. But you know, when you look at someone like that and you think, oh, I want to do that, go dig around a little on the internet and figure out what were they doing before? How long has it been? You know, what have they done along the way? This does not happen to anyone overnight. There is no such thing as an overnight success. Like even Mel Robbins, who people think she was an overnight success because she did a TED Talk and blew up because that concept really caught fire. And then she did a book and now she's this big speaker and whatever. But I found tons of stuff about what she was doing leading up to that TED Talk. She wasn't just like doing one thing and then she did the TED Talk and her whole life changed. No, it was tons of buildup before she got that TED Talk. And yes, the TED Talk was the turning point, but that was not overnight success. She had worked for that for a really long time.
Well, not only that, but she is like amazeballs. I mean, like she is like, I mean, I watch her helping people and I listen to her kick-ass Audible. And right now I'm doing her mindset reset for, you know, the new year. And she has a gift for real. I mean, I don't think I love her speaking, but
but even it was funny because I did a live about this a few months ago about, you know, those people you look up to, go back and see what they did to get here and whatever. I did this whole live on it. And that afternoon was when she announced that she was getting her new TV show. And in the post she put up on Facebook and Instagram, she talked about how she'd wanted to do this for like 10 or 12 years. I forget how long it was and how long it had taken her to get there and everything she'd done leading up to it, including the fact that she goes live every single day. And so you see her getting the TV show and you're like, oh, I want that. Well, go back and look at everything she did to get there and how long it took her to get there. You know, we're so programmed for like instant gratification that it's hard to stick with something long enough to see the results.
Well, yeah. And I know like I listened to Rachel Hollis. I really love her. And she talked a lot about what you said earlier is she said the difference between me and them, like she's talking why she's a New York Times bestselling author, is she never gave up when someone said no. Yep. She just kept pushing and kept going. And she's just like, I didn't give up. So that's the difference between accomplishing your goals and not accomplishing them.
Makes a huge difference. I just was telling this story the other day. I wrote my very first piece for Pop Sugar this week, and they've invited me to be a contributor. So I'll be writing for them going forward. But I've been pitching Pop Sugar for like a year, and I've written for what I consider to be big publications. I mean, I've written for Glamour, Men's Health, Woman's Day, Parents, you know, ESPN, Golf Digest, where I've written for dozens and dozens and dozens of publications. And it still took me a year to get into Pop Sugar. And I didn't just pitch them once. I've pitched at least half a dozen times over the last year. And quite frankly, not the only reason, but a big reason I finally got in was I met another writer at Pop Sugar and they introduced me to their editor. And once I got that personal introduction, I pitched again and I got a yes. But like, what if I had gotten the no the first time and just checked that off my list and moved on?
Well some people get all like huffy, you know, when they don't get a yes, when they ask.
And I'm the opposite. I'm like, tell me I can't do something and I will do it.
Yeah, you have to be more determined and you can't take anything personally. These people don't know you. You have to develop somewhat of a relationship and a rapport. Yeah. And also you need to develop a brand, right? You're all about that.
Absolutely. I think that's super important that you do have a brand, and people are always like, you know, what does that really mean? And everyone has a brand. You might not be intentionally building one, but everybody has one. It's whatever other people think of you. It's whatever other people think you do. Like as entrepreneurs, your brand is whatever it is other people think you do. And so the key to that for me is that you're consistently creating content around a somewhat tight niche. Now, you usually start broader, and over time that gets tighter and tighter. So I always tell people, don't stress about like picking some tiny little niche right in the beginning. You can start a little broader and start going down, but what I make my clients do, I call it the 3-bucket exercise. We do it when I first start working with clients, and I tell them, okay, you get to pick 3 things you want to be known for. 3 things, that's it. Not more, not less. 3 things you want to be known for. And then going forward, as we're pitching podcasts or guest blogs, or we're talking about speaking, anything, I tell them we call it in media, forward facing. So anything the public is going to see, it's got to fit in one of those buckets. So like, I wouldn't go on a podcast and talk about, how I balance my checkbook. Do I know how to balance a checkbook? Yes. But I'm not going to go on a podcast and talk about it because it doesn't fit in one of my 3 buckets. I don't want to be known for that. Some financial guru needs to be doing that podcast, not me. And I see a lot of clients get swept up in because they know something, they want to jump in. And I see it the most in Facebook groups. Somebody asks a question in a Facebook group and you're like, I know the answer to this. And so you answer it. Well, the problem is if you're answering questions on 20 different topics, no one in that group has any idea what you do, because they've seen you talk about, finance. They've seen you answer a question about law. They've seen you answer a question about the best time management software, whatever. And so when you've got this content out there that covers such a wide range of topics, no one has any idea what you do. And so I tell clients, even when you're in Facebook groups, do not chime in on a post if it doesn't fit in one of your 3 buckets. Even if you love your time management software, for me, I'm not going to answer the post about time management software because the person's going to get plenty of help. They don't need my help. Plenty of other people are going to chime in, and somebody like a VA or an OBM should be talking about that, not me. I'm only going to talk about personal branding and publicity kind of topics. And then everyone is going to be very clear on what it is that I do. So I'm a big believer in all of that forward-facing content you put out there in any format. It needs to be tightly focused around what you do and the type of clients that you want to attract.
Why is it so important to build your platform like a big name expert?
I don't think it depends on what you want to do. I don't think everyone needs to be that big name expert. It totally depends on what your personal goals are. Are you just trying to replace the income from the job that you left? Or do you want to become an international speaker who, you're making your living off of speaking fees? Those paths look really different. So when I start working with a client, we always talk about short-term and long-term goals, because I want to put the right puzzle pieces together to get them to their goal. And that's going to look totally different if they're trying to get paid to speak full-time versus if they're trying to build an agency or sell their book. So, and your goals can change. Like maybe you're focused on selling your book for the next few months, but then you focus more to building some other part of your business. I mean, definitely you have these short-term goals that change, but the path to get there does not look the same for everybody. And there's plenty of people who don't want to be that big name expert and don't need to be successful.
Right. A lot of people just want to have their niche in business and make money, and they're not looking to speak. And I would have to say, I was never looking to speak. I got the calling, like the purpose just kept haunting me, like that I needed to do it.
Right.
And I didn't want to do it.
But you're going to be glad that you did. I know it.
I love talking about all this. And one of the things I was picking up on earlier was how you talked about word of mouth. And this is all the same in my business with personal training. I work on the people right in front of me. I don't worry about who isn't there anymore or who might have left or who's come, whoever is right there in front of me, that is my product. And I give them the best results. And I'm telling you, that is the secret, because then I just get a ton more business and I don't have to go out looking for it. Yeah. So like you said, you're getting these referrals because of what you created.
Yeah. And you nailed it. Like the best marketing material is results. And whether that's word of mouth and people saying to their friend, you know, hey, I worked with this person, you should too. Or if you're like, a lot of times we'll put together a case study that we're using as an opt-in, or, you know, I'm doing a video on as we're going into a launch, or it's in my email sequence in my launch. There is no better marketing for your business than results. And so if you hyper focus on getting results for who you have right now, other people will naturally follow.
Yeah. And it's crazy too, because they're a believer already, because you transformed their friend's life. And when they believe, I have to tell you, I'm finding they get better results because they believe they're going to. And that's half the battle right there.
Absolutely. So, mindset's such a big piece of it.
Oh my gosh. It's totally is. Why should people start to look for publicity opportunities? I mean, why is that important?
Yeah, a couple of different reasons. You know, my sort of mantra that I always say, and that's kind of plastered all over my website, is that it doesn't matter how good you are at what you do if no one knows you do it. You know, so we just talked about, if you're getting those results, then definitely you're going to start to get that word of mouth, and you're going to start to, but depending on what kind of business you have, relying on word of mouth can be difficult. And especially in the beginning when you aren't really working with very many people yet. And so I think it's important to get out there and just let more people know about what you do, and more importantly, why you do it. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, and he has both a book and a TED Talk that are called Start with Why.
I have that. Yeah.
It's awesome. And he says, you know, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. I think they also buy results, which we talked about. But I also think it's important to talk about, why did you choose this business that you do? You know, most of us, whatever we do, we do it because we've already walked the path of whatever it is. And now we're showing other people how to do that. Like, you don't even have to be a coach. I don't consider myself a coach. I own an agency. I'm a service provider, but still I chose this type of business because, like you said earlier, I'm my own best case study. I had already done this.
Well, it totally lights you up. I mean, you were like, gushing and bubbling all over.
I do love it. And like I said, that's why podcast interviews are so great, because you can tell how much I love what I do. And that is going to attract people to want to work with me. And it's not just me. I mean, that would work for anyone who went on and talked about something they're really passionate about. So getting out there so that people know that you exist, they understand the motivation behind why you do what you do, usually that's going to help them see some little piece of themselves. Like, as you talk about your journey, they're going to hear some little nugget and think, that's where I'm at right now. Okay, if she got from there to there, she can help me do it. You know, so the more you talk about what you do and why you do it and your own journey, the more you're going to attract those like-minded people that you really want to be working with. And so publicity is important because it gets you in front of new audiences. So beyond just the audience you've cultivated on social media or on your email list, it puts you in front of other people's audiences. Like, I bet most of the people in your audience have never heard of me before. And that's awesome. I want to be in front of people who have never heard of me before. You know, I could go plenty of places where people have already heard me say these same things 10 times over because they've followed me for the last 2 years or however long. I want to be in front of your audience who maybe has never heard of me speak before and hasn't heard, you know, my strategies and my approach for what I do. And so I think that benefits everyone, and you want to start early. And I talked about it with the Forbes example and how Forbes wants you to give 3 links to stuff you've written in other places. So I had a client who came to me, she was already making 7 figures, and she was like, I want to be in Forbes. We had to backtrack and go place her in other blogs so that we would have links to use for Forbes. And that took a few months by the time those pieces were pitched, written, and then published. So if she had been doing that early on and had already had that, we would have had a much faster start. So I highly encourage people to start trying to get podcast interviews and guest blogs and free speaking gigs and stuff like that early on, because you're building the foundation to get those bigger opportunities you want down the road. And you can't get those bigger ones without having those foundational pieces first. So start now.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. Oh, so true. I know, like when I first started with my podcasting, I would have never dreamed some of the guests I have had on and the people I've had the opportunity to meet. I mean, it's beyond my wildest dreams, and I'm not even touching the tip of the iceberg yet. So I think I wouldn't have been ready for them at all at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, I thought I was ready to take on the Steve Harvey show, you know, and I remember my publicist for my book was kind of like, well, no, let's just start with these local TV shows and let's just do. And so I did them, and now I can see why, after doing all that, it creates this base for you to draw from and this experience, and you're learning so that when the big one comes along, you're ready for it.
Yeah. And for example, I have a client right now who is a pretty big name. He's an influencer. And when I send him podcasts, sometimes he emails me back and says, I looked at it. I looked through the reviews. I looked at the people they've had on. Like, I don't think this is right for me. You know, so you've gotta have those foundational pieces, get those early guests and keep building up, because he's not going to be on a show on their first episode. You know, he is at a level where he can wait until they've really proven themselves and built an audience. So you've got to get started somewhere. You might as well do it now, because your future self a year from now, 5 years from now, will thank you for the work you're doing now. It's really important.
And I also think you've just got to have some of that drive, that gusto, that passion that I see in you and that I know is in me. And all of my listeners out there, you have to put that to work, because it's not like a concrete roadmap. Like, you know, people getting opportunities are going after them. And it may not be the orthodox way that you've heard, or like this carbon copy of I did this, this, and this.
Right.
It's just about getting out there and going for it.
Yeah. Agreed.
Wow. This has been such a great talk today.
Yes, I had so much fun.
This is fun. Where can people get your book? What is the name of your book?
So they'd have to really like college football. I will preface it with that. But if you're a college football fan, it's called Saturday Millionaires. And you can just go to SaturdayMillionaires.com and find all the different links to order it. I have 2 books, both of which are in the sports business space. I'm actually now working on my first fiction novel. So that will maybe be a little more interesting to everyone, but I have to finish writing it first.
I love that. I love that. So you've written some books, but your main thing that you do now is helping people like me to get their name out there. And do you have like groups and courses? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I do. So I have 3 ways I work with people. I have done for you retainer services, where we're going out and identifying the right podcast to be on, the right guest blogs, speaking opportunities, TV, you know, whatever it is that you're interested in. We're writing the pitches, we're doing the pitching, we're following up. We're doing everything for you, except, you know, you got to do the actual interview if we land it for you, but we're trying to take as much off your plate as we can. And then I also do one-on-one coaching. So people who maybe don't have the budget yet to be working with us on Done For You, but maybe they want a little more hands-on than what's in my group program, which is the other way to work with us. My one-on-one coaching clients work with me for 6 months, and I'm guiding them along kind of every step of the way on what they should be pitching, where they should be pitching, how to write the pitches, and kind of we start building on early success and working towards whatever those big goals are that they have. And many of them, when they finish coaching, by then they're ready to move into the Done For You. And then sort of the entry level point, especially for people earlier on in their business, I would say most of the people in the group program are in their first year, maybe even 2 years, but I'd say mostly first year to 18 months. Most of them haven't quite hit 6 figures when they join the program, although there's a lot of people who are still in there who've now exceeded that during their time in the program. But that one it's the same thing I make my employees and freelancers go through. It's how I teach people my method of pitching, how I identify the right outlets, what a pitch email looks like, what it has to include, how you follow up with people once you get the opportunity, how you leverage it to get bigger and better opportunities. So that program, a lot more of the onus is on the student to do the work and send the emails, but you're going to get all of the information you need to do it correctly. And then I do office hours once a week so that if people get stuck or they have questions, you're getting support from me, not just from like random people on my team or people who've been through the program before. I'm in there in the Facebook group every day. And then I do the office hours once a week. So it's a great starting point for people who maybe haven't had any publicity yet or have had just a little bit. Good way to sort of boost that and get comfortable pitching yourself and start landing some things.
So the one-on-one coaching, how much of that do you do? Like, I mean, do you help write the pitch or?
Yeah, so I show them my sort of pitch method, and they've got templates and not exactly swipe copy because everybody's story is different. And I don't use like a fill in the blank. I teach the sort of structure of a pitch. They're writing it, but then they're sending it to me and I am like line editing it and giving feedback. If they want to pitch somewhere where either I've written or I have a personal connection, then I make that introduction for them so that the editor knows this is one of my students. There are editors that we work with in a number of places who know that my students know what they're doing when they pitch and when they get a guest blog and they're actually writing the blog, that I'm teaching them the right ways to do that. So over time, we've built really good relationships with a lot of the outlets our students want to pitch. The one-on-one coaching is all with me, not someone on my team, but I do that. So I only take on a few people at a time because I wish there were two of me, but there's not enough of me to go around sometimes. And I really love the one-on-one coaching and want to be the one doing it. So my one-on-one clients get me on the phone every other week, and then they're on Voxer with me and can send me questions or just use me as a sounding board anytime they want. They can send me pitches to review, guest blogs to review. So lots of hands-on support with that.
I love that. Yeah, one-on-one sounds really good. I'm sure the group's good too.
It is. And it depends on the person. Some people really need and want that one-on-one. They need the accountability of me pushing them forward. But some people really need to do it on their own time and their own schedule, and they can't fit coaching in. The group program's a better fit. So if you do the coaching, you get access to the group program. So not only do you get all the training materials, but when your 6 months with me is up in one-on-one coaching, you still have lifetime access to the group program, and you can come to office hours and you can continue to have that support from me.
That's awesome. Where can people find you on social media, and say your website again?
Yeah, my website's www.guidemybrand.com. And then all of my social media handles are Guide My Brand. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, I think all the big ones. So, and Pinterest too. And it's Guide My Brand on all of them. I was really lucky that I was able to get it and I don't have to have all these different names to remember.
Well, I just have two final questions. One is, what is your why? Why are you doing all this?
Because I saw what getting more visible did for my life and how it changed my life. I was a practicing attorney and now I run my own PR agency. I'm a travel writer and I get paid to go travel and write about places. I have a 10-day trip to go ski coming up in a few weeks that I'm paid to come ski and write about like how beautiful the mountains are. Like sign me up for more of that.
For sure, right?
I love the speaking and traveling for the speaking. So when I see where I'm at now, I mean, none of that would have happened had I not gotten visible and established myself as that expert early on. I mean, I just turned 37. I got my first book deal before I turned 30. So when I look back at the things I've been able to accomplish already, so much of that was just my willingness to send those emails and to get visible. And particularly, I work with male and female clients. Love my male clients. They're awesome. However, working with females is really amazing because statistics show us that very few women are willing to put themselves out there. There's this awful stat I talk about all the time that only 19% of experts featured in the media are women. And it's not because producers and editors are turning women down. It's because women aren't pitching themselves. And once I saw that stat, I became really dedicated to working with more women because men don't have that problem. Men are willing to pitch themselves. Those are not the conversations I have with my male clients. In fact, I generally only have male clients in my retainer. Very rarely do I get male clients in the group program or in the one-on-one coaching. because they don't usually have the same types of mindset issues that my female clients have. And so they need different kinds of support for their efforts. So I'm super passionate about working with women and helping them get over that hump and feel more comfortable about it, because we need more women out there in every industry talking about what they do and educating people and being that person we can look up to or that we can count on. And I really want to be the person who helps them get there.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I just want to acknowledge you so much for just the passion, just how like bubbly and vivacious you are. And I can just tell you're doing what you're meant to do, because your light is shining so bright.
Do.
Yeah, I really, you gave 110% today. And I know, you guys, if you sign up for her one-on-one or her group, you're going to get that same 110%. I can totally tell. What are 3 tips you could leave with the audience today? 3 simple tips.
I think don't be afraid to call yourself an expert. When I look back at like the turning point for me, in that email I sent to Forbes, to the editor, I called myself an expert on collective bargaining in Major League Baseball. And I was, but it was a ballsy thing to say at 25. And so few of my clients, especially my female clients, are willing to call themselves an expert. And you just need to understand, being an expert does not mean you are the world's foremost expert, that you're saying you know more than anyone else knows. That's not what that means. I tell my clients, you are an expert on your own experience. And so if you're positioning yourself by talking about your journey and why you do what you do, you are an expert on that path that you had, on that experience that you had. And people who are like you will be able to learn from you and overcome some of the same obstacles that you did. And so don't ever be afraid to call yourself an expert. Just remember, you're not the world's foremost expert. I'm not the world's foremost expert on anything, but you are an expert on your own experience. I am an expert on what I was able to do to change my career through publicity. So now I can show other people how to do it. So that would be my first tip. My second would be, don't wait to get started. I know I said this already, but people always think they need to have been in business longer, or they need to have made more money, or they need more degrees, or they never feel like they're enough, particularly women.
Oh my gosh, for sure. They don't think they're enough. They don't think,
and so they won't pitch
enough.
themselves because they don't think they're ready. But in the beginning, you're going to be pitching different types of outlets than you're going to be pitching 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. But get started now. We talked about it. You need those foundational pieces. So get started now. And then the last piece of advice, we mentioned this too, but it's worth mentioning again, just don't quit. Honestly, the biggest difference between the people who are successful and the people who aren't is the people who are successful didn't quit. There are going to be hard times. There are going to be times you think you're crazy. There are going to be times you're in tears, that you're screaming and cursing, depending on your personality. We all have those times. I've had those times. I've been like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? Why don't I just go back to being a lawyer and making, 6 figures?
I've had those times.
Than I make it now. You're going to have those moments, and it's just wanting it bad enough that you don't quit. You talked about it earlier. So much of like your blogging and getting to your book, so much of it is wanting it bad enough that you don't quit when things get tough. So I encourage everybody, don't quit. You never know how close you are to that breakthrough into the next level.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I loved your tips. Your tips are amazing. And I'll have to go back and hear them again because I liked them so much. And I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with the audience today. And everybody, give Kristi some love. Leave her an amazing review in iTunes. And thanks, everybody, for listening to the Sisterhood of Sweat.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.